John Mitchell sat at the head of the dining table, a glass of red wine in hand, surrounded by what should have felt like perfection. A loving wife, two teenage kids, and a spacious suburban home. Laura, his wife of 25 years, served lasagna, her laughter filling the room as their son retold a funny story from school. But, as John smiled, he couldn't shake the heavy weight in his chest. At 50, John felt like a shadow of himself. His once thriving construction business had plateaued. His body reminded him daily that his youth was slipping away, and his family seemed to live in their own worlds, leaving him to feel like an outsider. His son, Tyler, spent most evenings gaming, and his daughter, Emily, was glued to her phone. Laura, though loving, seemed too busy juggling her own commitments to notice his growing dissatisfaction. Later that night, John scrolled through social media, pausing on the smiling photo of his old college buddy, Greg. Greg had just remarried. His new wife was 28, barely older than Greg's daughter. The comments on the post ranged from admiration to ridicule, but John's mind fixated on Greg's beaming smile. "What's got you frowning over there?" Laura asked, slipping into bed beside him. "Nothing," he lied, locking his phone. But deep down, John felt an ache he couldn't articulate, a yearning for something he couldn't quite name. The following week, during a work lunch, John met Sophie. She was the waitress at the cafe his team frequented, a 23-year-old with bright eyes, vibrant energy, and an easy laugh that reminded John of simpler times. Sophie wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just herself, unapologetically carefree. "Another coffee, sir?" Sophie asked, her smile breaking through John's fog of discontent. "Yes, please, and call me John," he replied, smiling back for what felt like the first time in months. Over the weeks, their brief interactions grew into longer conversations. Sophie would linger at his table, talking about her dreams of traveling and her passion for art. For John, who felt trapped in his routines, Sophie's spontaneity was intoxicating. At home, Laura began to notice changes. John stayed late at work more often, his phone buzzed with messages he'd ignore or quickly hide, and he seemed distant during family dinners. "Is everything okay?" Laura asked one evening. "Just stressed from work," John replied, avoiding her gaze. But Laura's intuition told her there was more to the story. The friendship between John and Sophie deepened, crossing boundaries that neither openly acknowledged. John confided in Sophie about his struggles, his fear of aging, his frustration with his career, and his feelings of invisibility at home. "You're not invisible," Sophie said one evening, her hand briefly touching his. "You're kind, funny, and smarter than most people I know." Her words ignited something in John. He hadn't felt this seen in years. Back at home, Laura tried to bridge the growing distance. She planned a weekend getaway for their anniversary, hoping to reconnect. "I've already booked the cabin," she said with a hopeful smile. John hesitated. "I'll try to clear my schedule, but things are really hectic at work right now." The weekend came and went, with John canceling at the last minute. Laura spent the trip alone, texting him updates and hoping he'd surprise her. He didn't. One evening, John came home late to find Laura waiting for him in the living room. "Who is she?" Laura asked, her voice calm but firm. "There's no one," John lied, but the guilt in his eyes betrayed him. "I'm not blind, John. If something's wrong, just tell me," she pleaded. "I don't know what's wrong," he admitted, his voice breaking. I feel lost." Within weeks, John made a decision that shattered their world. He sat his family down and announced he was leaving. "I need to figure out who I am," he said, avoiding Laura's tearful eyes and the stunned faces of their children. "Figure out who you are?" Laura repeated, her voice rising. "You're a husband, a father. What about us?" "I can't be who you need me to be right now," John said, standing as if to escape the weight of their pain. He moved in with Sophie the next day. At first, life with Sophie was everything John imagined. They spent carefree days exploring art galleries, trying new restaurants, and staying up late talking about dreams and regrets. Sophie made John feel young again, her laughter chasing away his doubts, at least temporarily. But as the months passed, reality seeped in. Sophie's youthful spontaneity clashed with John's structured life. She wanted to party while he craved quiet nights. She talked about her friends and travels, but John's stories often circled back to the family he'd left behind. "Why do you keep talking about them?" Sophie asked one night, her frustration evident. "You made your choice, didn't you?" John couldn't answer. Meanwhile, Laura was navigating life without him. At first, she was paralyzed by heartbreak, unsure how to move forward. But as weeks turned into months, she began to rebuild. She leaned on friends, found solace in her church community, and even started taking evening classes to pursue a long-forgotten passion for photography. Her strength became an anchor for their children, who struggled with their father's absence. Tyler, once outgoing, withdrew into his room, while Emily became openly defiant, often lashing out. "I hate him," Emily said one evening, slamming her door after an argument. "Don't say that," Laura replied, though she understood the sentiment. As John's relationship with Sophie unraveled, he started reaching out to his kids. He texted Tyler, asking about his soccer games, and sent Emily messages about her favorite TV shows. Neither replied. "Why don't they answer me?" John asked Sophie one night. "Maybe because you abandoned them," Sophie said bluntly. The truth hit John like a punch to the gut. Sophie's words lingered in his mind, forcing him to confront the damage he'd caused. One day, Sophie packed her bags. "I'm sorry, John," she said. "This just isn't working." John didn't argue. He watched her leave, realizing that the freedom he thought he wanted had come at too high a cost. Alone in his apartment, John reflected on the choices that led him here. The laughter, warmth, and love of his family felt like a distant memory. He knew he couldn't undo the past, but he wanted to make amends. John's first step was writing a letter to Laura. "Dear Laura, I know I've caused you and the kids immeasurable pain. There's no excuse for what I did, but I want you to know that I regret it every day. You and the kids were the best part of my life, and I didn't see it until it was too late. I hope someday you can forgive me. Sincerely, John." He mailed the letter, unsure if she'd even read it. Laura did read it, but forgiveness didn't come easily. She was thriving on her own, rediscovering herself, and finding joy in her independence. When John showed up at Tyler's soccer game weeks later, the tension was palpable. Tyler ignored him, focusing on the match. After the game, John approached him hesitantly. "Great game, Tyler," he said. Tyler shrugged, walking away without a word. Emily was even more resistant. "You think you can just waltz back into our lives like nothing happened?" she said during a brief encounter. "No," John admitted, "but I want to try." It took months of persistence, attending games, showing up for Emily's school events, and offering support without expecting anything in return. Slowly, the walls began to crack. Tyler invited John to lunch one afternoon, and Emily started responding to his texts, though her replies were curt. Laura, however, maintained her distance. When John asked if they could talk, she agreed, but her tone was firm. "I've moved on, John," she said. "I don't hate you, but I can't go back." John nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I understand. I'm just grateful you're happy." The story ends at Emily's high school graduation. John sits in the crowd, his heart swelling with pride as his daughter walks across the stage. Laura is seated a few rows ahead, laughing with friends, her happiness undeniable. As the ceremony ends, John approaches Emily, offering her a bouquet of flowers. "Congratulations," he says, his voice thick with emotion. "Thanks, Dad," Emily replies, her smile small but genuine. "It's a start. Not a perfect ending, but a hopeful one."